Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Frontline Football. And today, as you can see by the screen, we're starting the off-season previews. So we're going to do some mimics of the teams. So here, I got the New York Jets fund right here. Solid $48 million, respectable. You can make some free agent moves. But now we're going to look at the Cowboys funds. You can see, got my wallet. Oh, that's weird. I don't see anything in the wallet, guys. Well, that sucks for the Cowboys. Looks like they're going to be broke again. But anyway, welcome to Frontline Football. Today we have some free agent money going to be flying around. So we'll get right into that right now. Roll the intro. Hey guys, welcome back to Frontline Football. It's me again, the guy from the intro. And we're about to get into the off-season previews as we start out with the East this week. And then I think it goes north, south, west for the next 3 weeks. So let's get right into it with the AFC East to start us out. Since I'm the New York Jets guy, we're going over them first. As you can see, as usual, there's money. There's always money to spend here. Not as much as last year, but still a pretty good amount for the most part. I'm going to go for the guys to bring back first. Braxton Barrios, of course. He was very underrated towards the end of his Jets career because he was the only receiver that wasn't on IR or didn't completely suck. So he was like going off, and he's a great kick returner and punt returner, so he's a special teamer, and he could be a good depth piece if people go down again. So I'd like to bring him back at the right price. Next, we got the Dr. Laurent Duvernay Tardif. Well, he's not like a well-known right guard. When we traded for him in the middle of the year, he played pretty well and better than the last guy, who was a complete menace for the most part. So I'd like to bring him back in an open competition sense, not like giving him the job, but open competition. And then last but not least, we have Joe Flacco and Michael White. I don't know which one I want to bring back. I want to bring them back both, but I don't know if we're going to do that. But we need one of them back. I'd prefer Joe Flacco just because he's got the experience, but Mike White's cool too. Thank you for beating the Bengals. But anyway, I'm going to get into the needs here. So first off, we open up with safety. Now, there's a lot of different routes the Jets can go to safety. They could draft Kyle Hamilton at 4, which is always a possibility. Generational safety would be very good and a solid defense because, you know, we don't have a single active safety on the roster besides Ashton Davis right now. So everyone else is either expiring or hurt or not coming back. So that would be another consideration. But what I want to focus on is free agent safeties, Jesse Bates and Marcus Williams. I think this is where the Jets can break the bank on the safety market so they can focus on forward pick, whether they want to use it on like a lineman or an edge rusher or something else if the board falls right. But overall, the biggest fan I am on this list is probably Jesse Bates. He's just really good, and if he'd like to come here, I'd give him all the money in the world. Second biggest need is probably tight end. If you watched any Jets football, you know our tight ends have butter and grease on their hands consistently. All they do is drop balls. One guy tried to hurdle someone in the Colts game and he got a concussion. So even when they do good stuff, they do bad stuff. So we definitely need an upgrade there. Similar to the free agent and the draft process of the safety, I'd take them both. I like Schultz. I don't know if I want to pay him all the money. So right now, my favorite option is probably Trey Mcbride out of Colorado. I'm a big fan of him. I think he'd fit well. If the Jets are trying to clone George Kittle or something, he'd be the perfect place to start, probably. And then there's Jeremy Ruckert, who's cool too. Edge rusher. So edge rusher, it's a kind of big need because we need another one because John Franklin Myers is technically an edge rusher, but he's supposed to be a hybrid defensive tackle, really. And Karl Loftus is kind of an uncertainty right now, how healthy he will be. But overall, edge rusher is something I definitely want to address in the draft, whether a Kayvon Thibodeau falls to 4, a David Ojabo with the second first-round pick, or a George Karl Loftus. But overall, I think Salah's defense does need another edge rusher, preferably someone that can be the primary edge rusher. I think it would go a long way to helping Quinnen Williams, Carl Lawson, JFM, all the good defensive linemen as a whole. Fourth need is probably cornerback. The Jets' cornerbacks outperformed somehow, which is cool, but they still need some work. They need a number 1 cornerback. This is where I'd be fine. Like, Derek Stingley would be nice. I'd pay J.C. Jackson or Mike Hughes. But we definitely need a number 1 outside cornerback. And preferably someone getting a nice fat deal. That'd be nice to just lock up the cornerback position for the time being. And last but not least, secondary need, but still a need, wide receiver. Braxton Barrios, Jamison Crowder, and Keelan Cole are all on their way out deal-wise. We'll see if any of them come back. And the Jets still don't really have a number 1 receiver. Elijah Moore and Corey Davis are nice, but I don't know if they're going to be leading the load. I think what's going to happen here is it's either going to be at 10 with Drake London, or they're going to make one of these 2 trades for Calvin Ridley or Amari Cooper. Both would be great, but overall, the Jets definitely need an outside threat, an outside number one receiver to take the pressure off and really help Zach Wilson be a security blanket like the Josh Allen to Diggs combo, Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill. They just need someone that can run the outside receiver like at an elite level, and this is how you do it, most likely through a trade because they got the assets. But anyway, that's my breakdown of the Jets offseason. What are your thoughts, Zach?
Oh, with Kyle Hamilton, I'm going to start off with guys to bring back. I think that these guys are all awesome. Mike White and Joe Flacco are a little interesting because backup quarterbacks are very interesting. You can find them later in the draft, but I like that Joe Flacco has a lot of experience and Mike White is just so good. And re-signing your right tackle, which played exceptionally well, like Jack said, and then Braxton Barrios is a really good gadget, like Deebo Samuel was for the Niners, and maybe Salah can use. I understand he's more defensive minded, but he had to have learned some offensive tricks in um the Niners, and Debo was a great gadget weapon, and now Braxton Berrios can be their gadget. Um, Now I'm not comparing Debo and Braxton Berrios. That's just they play very similar. All right, safety. Kyle Hamilton, I love. I think that Kyle Hamilton. No, I don't think. I know that Kyle Hamilton is the best safety in this class, and this could either lead to two paths. Number one, Adam Gase is not here, so Kyle Hamilton cannot get pissed off at the Jets unless the Jets do something very wrong. Jesse Bates is a top three safety in the league, and then Marcus Williams is a very solid safety for the New Orleans Saints, and he played pretty well this year. I believe so. Yeah, tight end. Most tight ends aren't good in this league. I haven't seen a really good tight end. Because most of the top are Mark Andrews, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, and then I sometimes Kyle Pitts when he comes out to play. But usually tight ends you can't really find are too good. Mike Gesicki you could get on. I know he's on that list, but Mike Gesicki you could get on a cheap deal, which the Jets love cheap deals. Dalton Schultz just had his best year, so it's gonna be kind of hard to get him because he's probably gonna want some big money. And then the two guys in the draft, Jeremy Ruckers, I think that says, and then Trey McBride. These guys are both really solid. Trey McBride had a 1,000-yard season in college for Colorado, and I think that he is the second best tight end. He is behind the A&M tight end. So I like I like Jack's choices with these tight ends. I think that these are all great. Edge rusher is huge because in Salah's defense, the reason it was so good a couple years ago, or not even a couple years ago, yeah, when the Niners made the Super Bowl, it was because of Nick Bosa and how good that D line is. So I think adding a guy like Karl Loftus, or if the Jets trade down this pick and they can get David Ajabo or Kayvon Thibodeau, another guy is go after is Aiden Hutchinson. If he can fall all the way, he is the most pro ready out of all these guys. And if the Jets can get him at 4, then number one, that is a big time steal because then the Texans, Jaguars, and the Lions have all passed on him, which is a very impressive feat if the Jets can get him. The next one is corner, and J.C. Jackson's a very solid option. The only problem I can see is he's getting up there in age. He is 27, so he only has about 3 more years in his prime, and then he's going to start taking huge regressions. Stingley is a really solid guy, and sometimes he falls to 10, and if you can get Stingley at 10, it's a very good corner to get there. And then Mike Hughes plays really well. Finally, wide receiver. There's a lot of routes the Jets could go with Chris Godwin, Mike Williams. They can even go with some underrated guys like they can take a chance on Michael Gallup, or even they can kind of shell out some money for Davonte Adams. Those guys are all pretty much old though. I think the best things is the Calvin Ridley trade. He's very young and he has a lot of great assets to this team, especially he can play pretty well in the slot. And I understand we have a Braxton Barrios if they sign him, but it's always good to have that number one option, like Jack said. And then the guy I'm kind of concerned about, but I think that the Jets, if he is there, should take him, is Drake London. he's had a lot of injury problems over this time, and I believe that he could be a solid piece, but there are some big time problems. And then finally, Amari Cooper is a really good talent. The only problem is he's a little bit old, and this Jets rebuild is going to take a little longer. But don't be surprised if the Jets can get a pretty solid team going and maybe get to 8-9. So yeah, Josh.
Okay, so I've been working on this. This is my draft book. I have 17 prospects in here so far. I'm hoping to add more. But for these drafting guys, I'll make sure to use this very well. As you can see, well, you can't see on the camera, but I've written a lot down about these prospects. So first I'm going to get to the people who they're trying to re-sign, which is Braxton Barrios. Braxton Barrios, probably an all first team, all NFL first team. He should have been the returner for that team. Unfortunately, he wasn't. He wasn't even a Pro Bowler this year. He was snubbed out of both of those honors, and with him being brought back, it just adds a good slot receiver and a good third option for the Jets. Doesn't play slot? Sorry about that. It adds a good third option for them. It adds that versatility of being a returner and also being a receiver, as you can see by the Buccaneers game. So, one of the big points that they're going to be trying to hit also Denu Tardif. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. I know everybody else has been saying it. He seems pretty good, especially with trying to get the guards all ready to go and have a little bit more of a competitive side to guards. And then with Joe Flacco, I think that he'd probably be the best here because Zach Wilson needs an experienced quarterback for a second year through these potholes that he's going to go through. And he looked at the end of the season after his injury, but at the beginning of the season he did not look good, so he needs to iron out himself. So I think Joe Flacco would be Mike White would seem like competition for him, while Joe Flacco is a veteran who can help him. Now we're going to get to the first thing, safety. So with safety, we're going to start off with Kyle Hamilton. I did a draft review on him, but I did. So what I found is that he is an amazing safety. His speed is great. His play recognition. He just knows where to put himself, it seems like at times. And just his size, his range, all this different stuff. He knows how to play his position, and he's probably a first pick if the Jaguars need it. But they're probably going to go after Neal. I'll explain that later in our other video. So with Hamilton, his cons are he can be aggressive from being too physical. And some of the times, he has had an ejection in his career because of a targeting call. So that's something that kind of scares you away from him. Also, his interception numbers are very low, but he is very good pass coverage and run support because with his pass coverage, he's able to cover them and have the speed to move around the field and just control the area. But he doesn't have the interceptions or the breakups to show for that stat. So I would say that he'd be a really good prospect for them to select. And then if they want to go in free agency, I think Jesse Bates would be good if Cincinnati doesn't re-sign. Marcus Williams seems like my third option for this. So next, with tight ends, I haven't done any research on Trey McBride yet. He's one of the soon, but he seems like a really good prospect from Colorado State. You know, a little bit of a smaller school guy, but he has the right build, and it seems like he has the intangible from the little film that I've seen on him. Now, Dalton Schultz, he is a very up and down tight end, as I've seen through this year, just because of his receiving core that he was in. But maybe if he's put on more of a main and not having to share receptions with his tight end too in Dallas, then maybe he can do better. And then Jeremy Ruckett also seems like a great person. Okay, now we got to get to the edge rushers because this is Saul Law's game. It's edge rushers. So, Thibodeau, he is an advanced. He's loved by advanced stats. He gets the pressures. He gets all of this stuff and he shows why he is a number one pick in this draft. Because he is explosive. He has a great power that he plays with. He's able to be flexible on the line so you can move him to wherever you need. And he has that die-hard motor where he can just go through and keep rushing, and he goes until the whistle. Except he doesn't have the stats to show for it. So in basic stats, he doesn't look good, but in the advanced stats, he looks very good. And he is a project. He's not the most polished like an Aiden Hutchinson, but if you develop him correctly, which I think he would be really good. So with this, some of the cons also is the Utah game. He did struggle against those Utah line, especially those plays. He seemed to not have his best showings and seemed to be off balance in those games. So those are my cons about him. And then with the Jawbo, he's another guy who I'm going to be getting to soon, but he seems like a really good player from what limited sample size that I've seen of him from the Michigan games, especially their national championship run, and the Ohio State game. So those look good. And then finally, Karl Loftus. The big thing I see about him is his injuries. But he seems to have the intangibles, just he needs to make sure that he can. So I think if Thibodeau falls, that'd be the best person for them to pick at this position. And now finally, cornerback. J.C. Jackson, good, but like Zach says, he's getting up there in age. His prime is starting to rescind, and I don't think that they have enough time for him to be in his prime. Next is Stingley. Stingley is a great corner. He's really good at what he does. He's great at mirrors, and he's really good with that punt beginning. And he doesn't. He doesn't get flustered by the window washing. 2 steps, the jabs. He sticks to their hips, and he makes sure to. I really think that he's developed for them. And then Mike Hughes, another really good corner. But I think if they could get both of them, if he falls to pick 10, then that'd be good. Finally, Drake London is not the option for the Jets. I think Amari Cooper is the best one they could trade for, but he is older. And it's only because Calvin we don't know due to his mental health reasons. Now, I hope he gets the help that he needs and can really find himself in this time. But I think Cooper would be the best one to trade for. And Drake would be the guy who I want to choose. Drake London had a third of his team's offense this year, which is the highest usage rate in all the NCAA. But he is injury concerned, and he seems to only do contested catching. Doesn't seem to be able to work in a person like Garrett Wilson. So I would say for them to take Wilson instead of London if it comes up at 10.
All right. Jack, you want to introduce the Dolphins?
Yep. Here we go. On to the next slide. So this is the Miami Dolphins. As you can see, they got a couple pass catchers they need to bring back, with their biggest needs being offensive tackle, wide receiver, running back, interior O-line, and quarterback. I guess I'll hand this one off to Zach.
All right. The guys to bring back is Will Fuller and Mike Gesicki, 2 really good players that Will Fuller didn't really get to show up, but Mike Gesicki had a pretty solid year. I'm going to start with tackle. Trent Brown is going to be, if they can get him, he's a little older, and Orlando Brown. Those 2 are very old. They're getting up there in age, so the Dolphins, they almost made the playoffs this year with being coached by and Flores. So I think that this Dolphins team, people are very undervaluing how much they actually can do. They're really good in the second half of the season, and hopefully their new coach, Mike McDaniels, will hopefully help this. Now, wide receivers. Now, Will Fuller is very quick, he can do a lot of stuff. He could be kind of a speedster on the team, which would be nice. Another guy I can see is Davonte Adams. Davonte Adams wants to go to a contender. And I believe the Dolphins have been a contender. It's just they didn't really show it this year. They almost had a 10-win season, which was very impressive, like I keep saying. And I feel like Davonte Adams could go here. They also could pay him and still have enough money to pay for other guys. Terrell Burks. I'm so sorry if I messed up the name. He's a really good wide receiver coming out of Arkansas. He had a really solid season, I believe, 1,000 yards. And he's just been really good. I think his route running is pretty solid. And yeah, running back. Running back is not the biggest need here because Myles Gaskins. But I like that we're looking at this, especially because Myles Gaskins doesn't have the best times, especially looking at his fantasy and looking at his actual stats. He doesn't have the best time usually. But a good guy to get in is James Conner. He's a really good touchdown back. He's good for when you get into that red zone area. Melvin Gordon was a great back for Denver and the Chargers, and I believe he can do a lot that they want. And then Jerome Ford, he's a really solid back coming out of, I believe it's Iowa State. And he had pretty good stats. No, wait, I'm wrong about that one. I'm sorry about that. That was Breece Hall coming out of Iowa State. Now, that's a guy that they could go after, but I think that I like this Jerome Ford, and I think that he could be really good. The interior line. Zion Johnson is a guard coming out of Boston College. He's really good at run protection, so that would help the running game with the running backs. Ryan Jensen's a really solid center, leading the Buccaneers. He protected Tom Brady, which is really impressive to do. And then Brandon Scherff is the best guard in the league, other than like maybe Zach Martin, some people like that. So if the Dolphins can get him, they can protect Tua or these quarterbacks that they could trade for or sign, like Carson Strong, which is a very developmental guy, but he had a very solid season this year, throwing for 4,286 yards, throwing 36 touchdowns, and only had 8 interceptions. So he likes to keep the ball safe, and I think that that's really solid. Now the Aaron Rodgers trade could happen, and they can get Davonte Adams and Aaron Rodgers connection going on, and maybe they can get some draft picks for Tua. And then Deshaun Watson has always been there, and he would change this team instantly if he got there. I'm going to hand this one off to Josh.
Okay, so with this one, since they are a little bit of a later team, I haven't done much research on the later round guys, since I've only done up to 17, but I've seen their stats and seen a little bit of film, and they've looked pretty good. So I'm going to start with tackle. Trent Brown, Orlando Brown, they seem really good, and just really great pieces that are pro-ready. Trevor Penning, he did come from a smaller school, so you got to take that. It's kind of the Trey Lance thing where smaller school, you don't know how they're going to work. But I feel like with some time and good coaching, he could be coached up into something great. So Will Fuller and Davonte Adams for Will Fuller, I really he's been charged in Houston. So I don't really know about him. He was very injured this year, was pretty silent as a receiver. Not really one of the biggest strengths of a team. Davonte Adams seems good, but he seems to be dead set on going with Aaron Rodgers. But if they could sway him with some money, I think that could help them. And then Treylon Burks seems like a really good option if they want to go receiver. And seems like a really good idea for them. So running back, James Conner, he seems really good for, like Zach said, he's a fourth down back. He's really good at powering through, especially at the goal line. Just making those plays that need to be done in those shorter yard situations. Not really one of those backs who can break out and just run down the field, but more of one of those backs that can just take the rock and do his job in a two-back system. And then Myles Gaskins, Melvin Gordon, not Myles Gaskins. Melvin Gordon, pretty off year this year. Jameson Williams, not Jameson Williams. Javonte. Yeah, Javonte. I meant to say Javonte. He's been taking his spot slowly and slowly. Are you smiling at me, Zach? But yeah, slowly and slowly getting his reps and taking it from Melvin Gordon And then finally, Jerome Ford. Pretty good back in the draft if they want to go that route. And I think it would probably be better to draft somebody instead of picking up these guys. Because free agency, it's really a hit or miss on who you get. And Gordon hasn't really been good since Los Angeles. So, yeah. And then with interior line, Zion Johnson, really good guard, run support for that team, and it helps protect Tua also. And I don't see the same thing of, because this is a big school, Boston College, and he seems like a really good guard coming out of that school. Then Ryan Jensen, like Zach said, blocked Tom Brady. Brandon Scherf, well, he's probably the best guard in the league. Maybe Zach Martin, but if you're getting a guard from the NFC East, it's a pretty good guard. 10-1, usually. They're really good at offensive line in that division. And then finally, quarterback. Watson is probably not getting traded over there because Tampa or Minnesota is what the reports are saying right now, and especially with they would want to have that liability on their team, especially when they're trying to, I don't know if they're trying to contend or just make playoffs. They're in a weird spot. I don't know what to call it. Aaron Rodgers could also be a good option this free agency. And Carson Strong is a little bit developmental, but it can work. And then Mike Gesicki, he didn't have the best year for a tight end, but it was pretty. It'd probably be a good idea to bring him. Jack?
So Miami, they're an interesting group here. They went 9-8 with the current roster, as you can see by the guys to bring back. It's not like a massive list, just 2, and they have the most money in the league. They swapped out Flores for McDaniels, but let's start with the tackles. I do expect them to spend on offensive line, almost a guarantee that they spend on offensive line, just because their pick is kind of late, so they're not going to be able to get one of the high ends, and they have a really bad O-line. They need to work on it now for the McDaniels train to start to take off. I think Trent Brown or Orlando Brown could be nice fits on their team. I think they still have Austin Jackson out of USC playing guard or tackle. I'm not sure where they want to put him long term, if he's even going to be on the line. That could also influence their decision where he's playing nowadays. I'm not sure. But I do expect them to go after a tackle. Another thing they need is wide receiver. They have Jaylen Waddle, who can kind of do it all, and he's very fast, number 1. But it would be nice to add someone else to complement him. Bringing Will Fuller back would make it easy. They also have Davonte Parker in-house already, so they just kind of need to add someone to that group. Treylon Burks would be an interesting pick in the back part of the draft. I think he's an intriguing talent moving forward, and I think he could complement Jaylen Waddle pretty well. As for running back, I do expect them to bring one in. Maybe it's not like a bell cow, but I do think someone to complement Gaskins would be helpful. The Shanahan 6 systems all run back to having a lot of running backs playing a lot of different snaps together. So you could bring in a James Conner or Melvin Gordon, or you could draft one. I haven't heard anything about Jerome Ford yet, but you could draft one as well. But I expect them to bring in someone on a cheap deal to complement Myles Gaskins. They can run a 2-back system over there. Now, this is where I expect most of their money to go, and that's the interior O-line, because this free agency class of interior O-line is ridiculous. You got a top 3 guard in Brandon Scherf. Only people in his level are Zach Martin or Quentin Nelson. And then you got a top pretty good center, I think top 5 center, and Ryan Jensen. I think if you could get one of these big fishes to help protect your quarterback, it could go a long way in their development moving forward. Especially on offense, giving Tua time to work with some good weapons. They already have solid weapons. They could add to that this offseason. But getting Tua an offensive line could take them to the next level. Or, as you can see with number 5, they could go the quarterback direction. They don't have the assets that they once had for a Deshaun Watson trade like they did last year when they had 3, I think. And they traded those picks all for Waddle for the most part. But they got some extra assets to work with if they wanted to go the path of a Deshaun Watson or Aaron Rodgers. Or they could even go in the draft with Carson Strong. That would be an intriguing prospect for them. But ultimately for now, I think they're just going to hang tight with Tua for one more year and see what happens. Because they're going to be able to spend big this year, get him another weapon, get him some offensive line, and then they'll readdress the situation next year depending on where they are.
All right. Jack, you want to introduce the Patriots?
All right, we got New England Patriots. This team's interesting. They've changed a lot from last year. because last year they had all the money. Now they don't have a lot of money. They have a little bit of room, not a lot. J.C. Jackson, Dante Hightower, and Trent Brown, some pretty big-name free agents need to come back. And so far their needs are they definitely need another receiver. Linebackers looking questionable with a lot of their linebackers on expiring deals. They could use a cornerback depending on what happens with J.C. Jackson. They have an okay safety core with Kyle Duggar, but they're going to need someone next to him. And then last but not least, if Trent Brown were to leave, they're definitely going to need to address the right tackle position. Guess I'll open this one up to Josh.
Okay, so first with wide receiver, Zac Pascal, for being a Texans fan, he looks really good, especially he was kind of silently good this year. He wasn't really known because a lot of people like to talk about Michael Pittman and the T.Y. Hill situation. And Zac Pascal, so you could probably get him on like some kind of cheap deal, and that'd be a good idea. Now, Jameson Williams, he'd be a really good talent for them. The only concern is, his ACL tear. Like I always say for prospects, if they have these really bad injuries or they keep getting injured, the injury is going to be one of their concerns. But he seems like a very complete prospect coming from Alabama and formerly before that, Ohio State. He seems just to know what he's doing, great with the work, just very good with how he runs his routes and gets yak after the play. One of the problems with him is his drops, too, and his ball security. Because he has stone hands to get it, but some of the times those drops can really be cruel, especially as shown by Alabama. But I'll cover those because, well, they're Alabama, so they have 5-star recruits galore. Now, one of the guys who I think would probably be in their range to get is a Chris Olave type guy. Chris Olave, I really see him as probably maybe a little bit better than Garrett Wilson in some ways, and just a really good prospect in general. His release is really good, his hands are good, and he has the yak ability. And he's great at contested catching. The only problems I've seen is his build, how much his talent has carried him, and sometimes his foot placement, but that's just a simple thing where he just put one foot down, and in college that works, but in the NFL, that's just simple footwork. But his route running is there, and just his contested catching. He can get up and get that ball, and that's why I like, and his yak. That's what really helps him too. So I think Olave would be a great player for them if they are in that position. Now next is linebacker. Dante Hightower would probably not be the best guy to bring back because he is 30, and that's starting. They're starting to contend, but I think that KJ Wright would probably be their best option here instead of Dante Hightower, because I really think that that'd be what I like to go with. Now their corners, Andrew Booth. I've heard about him. He's a really good corner, and he's really shot up the draft boards from his freshman year to now, especially with his freshman year punching a guy in the face. But that was a lot of stuff going on in his life, and that's a one-time occurrence. It's not like some of these players where they have multiple things. This is a one-time occurrence. A lot was happening, and it just snapped. We all have those moments, so I'm not going to hold that against him. But he's a really good talent. Not a first-pick type guy, but a really good, solid guy from Clemson. So I like what I see from him. Trent McDuffie's really good. I don't know if he's going to be on the board. I think the Eagles will probably scoop him up before he gets all the way to New England. But he seems really good also. He seems to be making sure to stay with his receiver and just knowing where they're going to go. That's one of the things that I really... Now, he doesn't have that jab like Stingley, but he's really good at what he does. He's a little bit undersized, but that's fine. So J.C. Jackson's probably their best guy to bring back. He's had really good seasons and has been really underrated these past couple of years. He's just started to make his name known. And next is safety. So Jabril Peppers, really good option. I think that could be one of their best options to go with. Marcus May, really good for Jets. and is just a really good safety if they want to go. Terrell Edmonds, he is a part of. Is he sort of the? Because I always mix those two up.
I believe he was a part of the Steelers.
Got it. Okay, so Terrell, very good Steelers player on that Steelers defense that went, I believe it was undefeated for the first part and then kind of, I don't know, flattened out by the end. But he's a really good prospect, so I think that's a really good sign. Then re-signing Trent Brown would be good. Need to protect Mac Jones. But if not, they could go with somebody like Nick Solder or Eric Fisher. Those are both really good options too. So I think that the Patriots dollars in cap space are probably one of the best situations right now because they're just starting to contend. They just need a couple more pieces. Needs a little bit more time, and then. So I think this is a really good option, and Zach.
All right. With wide receivers, Zac Pascal. Watching a lot of Texans games with Josh. He did pretty solid when Carson Wentz was throwing him the ball. So yeah. Jameson Williams. I do like him better than Chris Olave. I understand Josh doesn't like the ACL tear, but some people have had ACL tears and they have done really well in the league later. I think I like a guy named Jaylen Doxo for them if they want to go with this guy for another guy. He's improved every single season he has had with with Penn State. So because he had his believe that was his sophomore year. He had 800 yards, and then he really killed it his last year, which was a 1,000-yard season. So, another problem I see with Chris Olave as he doesn't get as many touchdowns as Jameson Williams does, and I understand that that's because like Chris Olave is having to share carries, sharing receptions with Garrett Wilson, but they both are not really big touchdown guys, so that's a bit of a problem with me. But other than that, I think that these two guys could be really solid in this league, and you can hear their names a lot more. Dante Hightower and KJ Wright for the linebacker position. I don't believe that they should focus on linebacker this year, and if they are, then try to get Leighton Vander Esch on a cheap deal. I know he's not on there, but yeah, there's some other like underrated linebackers. I don't think they should spend a lot of money in this linebacker area because there's not a lot of good ones this year. Corner Andrew Booth is he is a top 5 corner in this class, and he had a really good season this year. He had 3 interceptions and 5 passes defended. Pretty solid. It could have been a little better. It was better than his. It's actually been his best season, which being number 5 for this corner class is very impressive because it's a very deep class. And if JC Jackson doesn't come back, which JC Jackson, I've already said a little bit ago, getting kind of old. I believe that the Patriots can get to that Super Bowl range in 3 years, so I think JC Jackson would be perfect there. But with Andrew Booth and Trent Duffy, these guys would be young and they are both very good. Trent Duffy is a top 3 corner in my opinion, so yeah. Safeties, I really like the safeties that Jack and me made for this one. With Jabril Peppers, he's had really solid years. He's a little older. Marcus May, very much older, and has some problems with Jets and organization usually. That's a big concern. Terrell Edmonds is kind of, I believe he's the youngest guy there. And yeah, he's only at the age of 25. He also can play a little bit of like an Isaiah Simmons type with being a linebacker. You can move him down to linebacker sometimes. So that linebacker position could get covered by using Terrell Edmonds. Finally, tackle is Trent Brown, Nate Solder, and Eric Fisher. These guys are all really great. If they can re-sign Trent Brown, that's best situation. But Nate Solder's not a bad tackle, and Eric Fisher hasn't played in a year, but He can still be solid. The only concern is injuries. So yeah. I already talked about the guys to bring back. So yeah. Jack.
So New England's offseason is slightly different this year. So I'll start out with the wide receivers. While they did add 2 in free agency last year, they're not like eye-popping or anywhere near number 1 options. They just have an army of number 2 and number 3 options. You got Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby Myers. I'm not going to say N'Keal Harry. Who's the other guy I'm missing? Nelson Aguilar. Like, these guys are like okay receivers, but they're not going to like lead the pack. I think New England, if they want a top receiver, it's going to have to come in the draft. Whether that comes in Jameson Williams, I understand the ACL, but he's still super talented. I think it'll be worth the risk if you're New England. Or Chris Olave, another talented Ohio State receiver out of that nice duo that's coming in the draft this year. That would be beneficial. But if you're not able to do that and you want to address something else in the draft, there's always the Zac Pascals of the world that fit New England's system, and you'll just have to rely on your tight ends heavily like you did this year. Linebacker, that's another big need just because there are a lot of people leaving the door. I'm not sure how you're going to address it. I feel like it's best to address it in the later rounds of the draft, not necessarily spend your precious bucks on a linebacker. Try to bring Dante Hightower back, but if you can't, it's not the end of the world. KJ Wright, you could get cheap just because he's older, but he's a very good player still. Cornerback, you're definitely going to need. With the uncertainty of J.C. Jackson, there's not a lot outside of that. I love Andrew Booth to the Patriots. That just makes sense for some reason. If he's there, he may not be. McDuffie's another good fit for New England. I think even if you keep Jackson, you could still consider taking one of these guys to complement Jackson, and then whenever Jackson's gone, this guy will step up as the number 1, kind of like what Jackson did to Gilmore a couple years ago. That kind of cycle. But overall, I'm a big fan of New England addressing the cornerback this offseason and saving linebacker for later. Safety's another position of need. They need someone to pair up with Kyle Duggar, with McCourty getting really old and on the last year of his deal. Jabril Peppers is an interesting option. He's from the Giants. He's been all right on the Giants. My favorite option of the list is probably Marcus May. Marcus May's a really good player that got dealt a really bad hand with the Achilles injury, but I think if you could bet on him getting healthy again, you could steal him for a surprisingly cheap amount of money, a prove-it deal kind of thing, and you get him into a division rival, all that. But overall, this could be a big bang for your buck, low-risk, high-reward kind of deal. Then Terrell Edmonds, that's another intriguing option if you want to go that direction to pair with Duggar. I think he could fit Belichick's defense pretty well. And last but not least is probably right tackle. It's the only weakness of their line, and that's if Trent Brown leaves. I think with $8 million, definitely try to retain Trent Brown. But if you can't, you could get another solid veteran option. I don't know how good Nate Solder's been lately. Maybe on a better O-line, he could be a better player, but I don't trust him a lot. Eric Fisher, I trust a little more than Nate Solder. But overall, you just want a solid veteran protecting Mac Jones' right side. You have a strong guard on that side, Shaq Mason, so it's not like he doesn't have someone to lean on like the Giants, where the Giants' O-line was consistently a disaster. But overall, New England, this is going to be a lot of drafting. You'll be able to get 1 or 2 solid deals done in free agency, but I think a lot of drafting's in New England's future because they only have around $8 million to spend.
All right, Jack, you want to introduce the Bills?
All right, the Buffalo Bills. I guess I'll take this one. For this one, we'll start with the guys to bring back. There's not like a lot. There's just the normal veterans, Jerry Hughes and Emmanuel Sanders. This is the first team in the division that we're looking at for contenders. So this is kind of the contender offseason. Not a lot of money, but you're not like completely poor, unlike a certain other team that's broke again, the New Orleans Saints. But overall, Buffalo, running back is probably their biggest need right now. You got to remember, while the running game did get a little better towards the end, it was their weakness throughout the year, and over-reliance on Josh Allen hindered them as a whole. So I think it's best to bring someone in to potentially complement Stingley. The Bills are in a position where they're good enough football team to go out in like the second or even in the late first and get like Kenneth Walker. That would be a really nice fit to add to Buffalo's backfield. Or they could go with an old friend from New England and Sony Michel. That could be an interesting pairing with Singletary as well. Sony Michel played pretty good for the Rams for the most part, even though most of the times he was the number 2 back. But when he had to step up, he did. And then there's James White. I think that's actually a pretty good fit that adds some pass catching to the running back group in Buffalo, and I think that could work really well too. But overall, Buffalo does need to add some talent to that room. They need to start getting a run game going so Josh Allen can do his thing more efficiently and not be over-relied on. Another thing they need is another wide receiver. They got Diggs, they got Beasley, they got Couple other guys. Dang it, I'm blanking on his name. Gabriel Davis, that's another good guy they got. But they still need, like they did with John Brown on the way out last year, they added Emmanuel Sanders. They're going to need another complimentary speedster to Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, and Gabriel Davis. And that could come in a lot of ways. I think the OBJ to the Bills would be intriguing. I'm not sure when he'd be able to play, but that would be really nice if he'd able to come back in the late part of the season and much like he did the Rams, kind of put them over the top. They have some other options. They could go with Jahan Dotson in the draft. That would be intriguing to add to the group, depending on where you have to draft him. And Cordero Patterson actually makes a lot of sense if they can afford him. He could be a running back, a wide receiver. He can be Mr. Do-It-All. That would definitely help Josh Allen get some pressure off his back. So looking at number 3, they definitely need a cornerback as well. They have Tre'Davious White, but they need someone to complement him on the other side. So as you can see, we picked a lot of number 2 cornerbacks. I think Patrick Peterson could be a good complement, a nice veteran cornerback to round out the room. Kevin King could be a nice number 2 potentially moving forward next to Tre'Davious White. Then Jason Verrett, the guy who always plays solid but is consistently injured. So maybe the Bills will get him on a healthy year, get a little lucky, and get a really good cornerback. Tight end, that's another kind of big need. Not major because Dawson Knox is very good, but if they could add another tight end, another offensive pass catcher or blocker, that would be nice. Jared Cook is pretty much good wherever he goes. Him as a secondary tight end could be potentially dominant. And then you have the great Eric Ebron, who once again could be another very good secondary tight end. I think adding a duo Knox and another tight end cheap, that could go a long way moving forward in the weapons department. And then last but not least, you have the defensive tackles of the Bills. I think this is an intriguing room for Buffalo because this is the moment where you notice their contenders. Look at the names: Hakeem Hicks, Ndamukong Suh, and Calais Campbell. If you could get a veteran presence on that D-line since you could potentially lose Jerry Hughes, that could be helpful. Not to mention you look at all the young defensive line talent they have. Ed Oliver, Gregory Rousseau, and Carlos Basham. Hakeem Hicks, Suh, or Campbell could potentially be the veteran presence on the defense and mentor those guys to allow them to continue to develop. But overall, looking at Buffalo's offseason, they're going to just try to reestablish themselves, reload, and potentially make a run at the Super Bowl. What are your thoughts, Zach?
With running back Kenneth Walker, they'll probably get in the second round. The only problem with him is he's only had one good year, and the other years have not been the best years. But that 1 year was almost a Heisman level year, so that tells you something about that. Cordero Patterson, I'm gonna say he's like running back and wide receiver. He's a gadget player. You can use him in a lot of situations, and like Jack said, can get a lot of pressure off Josh Allen's back. So yeah. Sony Michel played really solid for the Rams. I understand he was in like a 3-back system with Cam Akers coming back somehow. Darrell Henderson, which played really solid, and then himself, which was really good. James White would have a passing game, like Jack said, and he's still not a bad running back on the ground, too. So I think that James White could be a really solid option there. Now, for wide receivers, Jalen Doxson and OBJ are really good. OBJ is going to want some money, though, and that's the biggest problem because he told the Rams he would be like, give him a cheap deal. I don't want to know what the expensive deal is, but I feel like the Bills are contenders and they can actually probably get a guy like that. Jalen Doxson is a really solid guy. I just talked about him during the Patriots stuff. He had a 1,000-yard season. He played really well for Penn State, especially losing a lot of pieces on that Penn State team. He played very well, and I think that he could be a very good wide receiver. The only problem is he's very young, and the Bills are trying to win right now. So that's a bit of a problem. Corner. I love Patrick Peterson to the Bills. It just sounds like it works. And he doesn't even have to cover the number 1 option on a team unless you are going against like the Rams or maybe the Buccaneers if they sign Chris Godwin. You're usually going after a wide receiver that has either he's a one-trick pony, or he has some skills in other areas, but you can cover him because he's not the number 1, which is better on Patrick Peterson, especially being that old. Kevin King did get dusted, so just don't get him against speedy safeties. Maybe get him against slot guys and maybe like just better route runners or deep threats. Don't get him against a speedster or else he will get burnt. And then Jason Verrett, like Jack said, has some injured seasons here and there, but very solid. With the tight ends, Eric Braun played really well for the Steelers. When they didn't have Freiermuth on the field. He did get replaced though, which was kind of sad. So they might get him on a cheap deal. Jared Cook, like Jack said, is good anywhere he goes, and that would be a very lethal tight end combination. And then Mike Gesicki, which just got added. He's really good. We talked about him in the Dolphins. He could do a lot, but that he's gonna want some money because he had a pretty good season this year. So yeah. And then finally, like Jack said, this is the all in. So Hakeem Hicks, really solid. I think that he could bring a big leadership with also Ndamukong Suh and Calais Campbell. These guys have all been very good veteran leaders on some teams because Calais Campbell, especially with the Cardinals being very young, he was trained up very well, and then he went to Jacksonville, had that Saxonville going. Then he was a good veteran leader for Jason Owe or a Fitu Owe, whatever his name is now, and made him into a pretty good pass rusher. I think any of these guys could be perfect for the Bills, and getting some older talent on this team could help them a bunch. Josh?
I feel like with this offseason, it really did show whenever the Bills lost and their defense just couldn't stop Mahomes. I don't care what you say, that defense did not deserve to be in the AFC Championship, especially with the way that they were. So I think this offseason will be getting Josh Allen some more pieces so then not everything is with him, and working on your defense. So, because they are a negative $5 million in cap, I don't think that these people who they have are good people to bring back just because the cap situation. Just because $5 million in negative cap doesn't look good, but they're contenders. It's time to go big or go home. Cordero, I don't think they're going to get because he's going to want some money. He can play wide receiver, running back, kick returner, and backup safety. So I don't think he could be a good idea. But Kenneth Walker seems like a really good idea. At Michigan State, he controls their team, especially it showed in the Ohio State game. I know he didn't do much, and that's because his coach made a unwise decision that showed kind of his newness to being a D1 head coach. He tried to go into a passing battle with and didn't rely on his run game that had gotten him to that point in the season. So Kenneth Walker's a good guy. Sonny Michel wasn't a 3-back. He does have fumbling problems and age, so make sure to keep up with that. James White, pretty good receiving back, just like Jack said, so he probably help make the passing game more lethal. OBJ out. Jahan Dotson really been rising up these boards, really good at Penn State, and I think he could be a really good idea. Best corner who I think right here is Jason Verrett. I really liked him in San Francisco. Just he needs to make sure to stay healthy because that really showed even in the Bills was their health, especially with Tre'Davious White going down, and then defend Tyreek Hill, who would keep getting open, and then Travis open, and everyone would keep getting open, and then they lost. So I think Verrett would be a good option to help with that second corner, and then a tight end. Dawson Knox is pretty good, but I think Eric Ebron would just add that second factor to it. And then finally, defensive tackle, you're going to need someone, I think a Calais Campbell, to bolster up that line and to just help them get. Okay.
All right. So we're going to go on.